Hey, well, tonight I'm angry because we appear impotent. And I'm talking about the United States of America. And while the previous 4 years we may have appeared incompetent, I will take incompetent over impotent. The reason that we seem impotent now is because we are making threats that we cannot follow through on. I'll point to just a couple. First of all, President Biden just recently accused Vladimir Putin of being a killer and of having no soul. Putin's response was to challenge Biden to a live debate. Those of us who have seen Biden over the last year worry that he will not be able to survive even a short-term debate without a teleprompter. God knows he hasn't even been able to survive questioning from the press, hasn't even had a press conference with questions, and I believe isn't even planning on a press conference with questions at the next quote-unquote press conference. But we're not here to complain about President Biden and press access. We're here to complain about the fact that America, which has been the primary military force on the planet for the last 50 years, is now appearing impotent. Because we are making threats that we cannot follow through on. If you followed President Biden on the campaign trail, you will have noticed that whenever he was challenged, he would accuse his challenger of either be lying, not being fit enough to compete with him in a round of push-ups, or some other macho challenge. Joe Biden is not a young man, and while he may be able to do a push-up, I doubt that the Secret Service would allow him to endure that kind of a stress. It is one thing to have a president who is frail, and there have been frail presidents in America's history. Look at FDR, for example, who was very ill while a president. But there's a big difference between being frail and appearing impotent. And when you make a threat, and that threat is challenged and you have no response, that is when you appear impotent. Here's another example of impotence, if not incompetence. And I'm talking about the recent SolarWinds hack. There were two big hacks recently. SolarWinds, which has been attributed to the Russians, and a hack of the Microsoft Exchange server, which has been attributed to the Chinese. Now, you may not be aware of this, but it is these days virtually impossible to determine the origin of a cyber attack. IP addresses can be spoofed, locations can be spoofed. It is virtually impossible to determine the actual legitimate origins of a cyber attack. But yet, the US 2 weeks ago made this announcement. They were going to be launching cyber attacks on Russia. What military authority has ever recommended warning your enemy of an attack prior to it taking place? This is incompetence of the highest order, and I don't know if we just want to make sure that the Russians know that it was us when an attack takes place, or if we're trying to bully them. But this bullying approach is having the opposite effect. We attempted to adopt the moral high ground against the Chinese in Anchorage over the weekend, and the Chinese slapped us down pretty badly, pointing out that we really don't have a moral high ground to dictate to anybody on democracy or the treatment of minority populations or on voting rights for that matter. More worryingly, the Chinese also warned us that they didn't consider us to be negotiating from a position of strength. I'll put this in context for you. Recent Pentagon war games have shown that the US would not be able to defend Taiwan. If this is true, why would we possibly tell the Chinese this, unless we were essentially giving them a green light to take over Taiwan, which they will do eventually. They've always claimed that Taiwan is part of China. We may send our warships through the Taiwanese Straits, but we are not going to be able to defend Taiwan from invasion by China. And yet we continue to bluff and bluster and bully and pretend as if we are still the military leader of the world. We are not. We have blundered so massively. We have caused our two primary competitors on the world stage, China and Russia, to unite because our blundering diplomacy has made them realize that they are stronger together. And now we really seem to have painted ourselves into a corner. We still talk tough. We still are willing to risk our military-aged children, including my own and possibly yours. But the worrying thing is that if you remember back to schoolyard days, the bully eventually runs out of fearful victims, and one day the bully is old and tired and doesn't realize that his threats don't carry any weight anymore, and the entire schoolyard rises up against him. And my concern is that this is us. We have elected a leader who does seem physically frail. He may be very acute mentally. I doubt it. It certainly is possible though. But the way we're acting, the way we seem to be showing weakness to the world, the way we bluff without holding any cards, the way we act as if we don't have any real rivals in the world, the way we act towards Russia, the way we act towards China, the way we feel that we can bluff and bluster, the way we think that the world will respond to our military might, our economic might, as they did decades ago, those days are past. And just as sad as it is when an elderly gentleman becomes impotent and still crows about how competent he is, this is my concern today. We act as if we are the young, healthy nation of 30, 40, 50 years ago. We are not. We have huge domestic problems. We have huge domestic debt. We really are not able to afford projecting force beyond our borders anymore. We can't even afford to maintain our own infrastructure, and yet we are still acting as king of the hill. I worry that our impotence is going to lead my children into war. Please let's wake up.